Hello, I'm Lauren, and this is Improving the World. I am an international improviser based in Hong Kong, and I talk to amazing improv women all over the world. Today, I am talking to Holly Laurent. She is from Chicago, and she is now in LA doing the LA Improv and Comedy Hustle. She is amazing and has her hands in many different pies. She has fantastic ideas, worldviews, psychology, and thoughts to share. So I do hope that you enjoy. Hi, Holly.
Hello, love. How are you?
I'm quite well, thank you. You are a comedian. Full stop. You do quite the extensive selection of different things in comedy, everything from improv, teaching and performing, writing. You do work for radio, you're developing stuff for TV. It is LA, all improv and comedy things.
I usually wake up and while I'm having coffee, I look through all the headlines of the major, like Washington Post, New Yorker, all of that to just be like, okay, what's sort of happening in the world for my references in terms of improv, whether it's creating commentary or always trying to formulate jokes for stand-up and to be constantly crafting my opinion about what is happening in the world in case I do any crowd work with stand-up or if anything comes up reference-wise in improv and all of that. I usually start writing for a couple hours. Right now I have a couple treatments going for half-hour single camera comedies that I'm pitching. So I just hustle all day. I'm trying to inform myself, keeping my mind sharp. I'm an essayist too on NPR here. There's a nationally syndicated live variety show that I do humorous essays for.
And just for anyone who is not entrenched and totally dipped and marinated in the LA-ness, you mentioned treatment earlier. So for people who maybe are thinking sour cream and cucumber on the face, that's not what you meant. What did you mean when you were talking about treatment?
Usually you try to pair up with a studio or a production company. What they'll do is greenlight your idea and then you craft a treatment where you have your one line. In one sentence, you describe what the project is. And then you have the one page. Your one page fleshes that out. What does the world look like? Tonally, what is it like? And the characters that are there and maybe the themes that you'll be deconstructing.
Do you feel like when you're doing this work, crafting out and scoping out either character bios or a treatment or being able to take and summarize an entire thought out concept into a one line, does this help you with your improv being able to look at it from these different angles, and or does your improv help with the crafting of this info for the LA scene?
I would say both. It can go either way. Sometimes for improv, it can be really tricky, especially for improv students. A lot of times improv students get hung up on how can you instantaneously at the top of a scene have a fleshed out character point of view, who they are, how they see the world, what they want, how they express themselves, all of that stuff. How can you have that right at the snap of a finger? Because you're also synthesizing so many other things. You're looking up to see who are you in the scene with? What's the information that they are giving you? Two people, it seems like they're against me. Okay, it's two against one. Or I'm in a scene with one person. It seems like they're in love with me. Or it seems like we're best friends. I've had so many improv students through the years ask me, how do you instantaneously at the top of the scene have a character point of view?
Yeah.
And my thoughts on that continue to evolve, but my current thought on that is I believe that having a strong character point of view at the top of the scene is just simply you as the performer. Do you have something to say? Do you have something to say about the world, about what it feels like to be alive in the world? You can derive your confidence from that. Then you can sort of relax into the scene and you can give yourself some space while you're improvising to then discover how that particular character expresses and executes that thing that you, the performer, has to say. So you might realize as you go through the scene, oh, I kind of got like a Spitfire kind of thing where I'm not going to take any shit. I think you can allow yourself time to discover that improv is about being in a state of discovery, not invention. If you think you have to invent all of it instantaneously and have your character bio, you have your work cut out for you. And then it's going to be really hard to be present for all those other bits of information that you're getting from the audience, from your scene partner, from the piece itself. the whole show. But if you allow yourself to be in a state of discovery rather than invention, give yourself space and breathing room to discover those things together, because you're discovering the relationship as you go with you and your scene partner. And that's also going to inform you a little bit more about your point of view. When you're sitting down to write character bios, you have the luxury of, oh, I played this character that was so fun, who didn't take no shit and who always said what was on his mind or her mind or whatever. And I'm going to kind of start there. And you have the luxury of crafting it or basing it on your best friend or your mom or whatever. I always tell my improv students, don't try to write the scene that you're in. Writing is for someone like Stephen King or Elizabeth Gilbert, who has all day long alone with a laptop to craft it. You are on stage in front of a live audience with an unpredictable scene partner. You have no idea what they're thinking. So if you start to write something in your head, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot, because if you're kind of white knuckling your idea and it doesn't fit with their idea, then you're like, oh no. And one of the things we want to avoid when we're on stage live is to enter into that emotional space of, oh no, where we kind of go on our heels. We want to stay on the front of our feet and be like, this is fun. All I have to do is listen and discover and be present. Your laptop, you can be like, oh, this is Samantha and she's into crystals and she's sex positive and she's always telling people their past life regression stories, whether they want it or not. But immediately on stage, you have to give yourself some time to breathe and be like, I'm getting the feeling that I'm kind of like a sex positive person who always gives people crystals. Oh, he's into it a little bit more.
I already love that character and I'm ready to play it.
You can add it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm so into Samantha. Holly, talk to me about risk. When you are there on the side and you're waiting to go in or you're ready to approach a scene, for some people that can feel like a really risky thing. It can feel very scary. And I'm wondering what you think about this idea of how risk fits into improv, making choices when you go on stage and you're there in front of everyone.
I have so many thoughts about this. Because I think improv is risk entirely. And so if you are very risk averse, it might not be for you. But I think it's actually why a lot of scenes for newer improvisers usually devolve into arguments or conflict. A lot of times we will initiate conflict because conflict is certainty. If I'm angry at you because you keep doing this thing that I don't want you to do, in that moment, I'm very certain about what's happening. And so that's a little bit more comfortable for me. Improv is about uncertainty. And the more we can say everything about this scene and where it's going is uncertain, and just until that starts to feel fun, and it will, if it doesn't yet, and you have those butterflies in your tummy on the sidelines, or you're nervous to go in, the risk feels uncomfortable. And the discomfort is not pain. It's just that it's not familiar. And it will become familiar, and then you'll love it. I mean, you'll get to the point as an improviser where it's like getting high, when you can really get to that risky point where you're like, I have no idea where this is going, and I don't know what I'm doing. Love this feeling. At first, for a lot of people, that feels very unfamiliar, uncomfortable, unpleasant. Push through it. It might feel unfamiliar and unpleasant until the day it doesn't. And then all of a sudden it starts to feel really fun. So just keep going and know that there are a lot of people out here in the improv waters saying, oh, the water feels good. Come on in, come on in. But the way you come in is risk. And the thing inside of risk is failure. And I think what so many people are doing is they're trying to find the improv breaks so that they don't fail, when in truth, the only way to play is to fail a lot. I think a lot of times it's specifically difficult for females because, at least females in my culture that I grew up in the States, females are raised with the expectation of being perfect. There is this cultural expectation and family expectation and female expectation of being perfect. You have to have the perfect body, the perfect complexion, the perfect hair, the perfect outfit, the perfect attitude, which is not helpful because it is 100% impossible. If the standard is perfection, then there's no room for failure. And if there's no room for failure to us mentally, there's no natural risk taking, because we've been taught that intrinsic to risk is failure. So when females specifically come to improv, we're like, whoa, this feels really freaky to me because I'm so afraid of failing. In the States specifically, whereas females are raised to be perfect, males are raised to be brave, which I think is also probably just as not helpful and just as painful as as the female standard we're held to. And I'm sure it's painful, but because I grew up a girl, I don't know. But inside of being raised to be brave, there is an intrinsic risk taking. So when it's a girl on a team with 10 guys or 3 female identifying people in a class of mostly men, there's already this thing, whether we're conscious of it or not. The majority of the people in this room or in this show or in this class or whatever, sometimes we will feel it almost like unconsciously. They have an advantage over me because they're not as risk averse.
You mentioned that maybe sometimes in a class, there'll only be a minority of people who are females or identifying. Why do you think that there are more gents in the room for comedy or improv?
I would say in 20 years in the improv world, at least here, well, in London too, I'd say in London, New York, LA, Chicago, and a lot of the bigger university towns in the States, I've seen over the last 20 years, it went from like 1 girl for every 10 dudes to now sometimes I walk into classes and it's majority female. I mean, not always, but I've noticed a difference, at least here. It's a lot more female identifying people, which is really exciting. My first improv group in Chicago, it was 2 girls and 8 guys. And I remember one time our coach after a show came down really hard on me and the other girl because he was like, do you notice that you 2 are always doing scenes together? Why don't you play with the other people in the group? And we were like, are you fucking kidding me? Don't you see that when we go out, the guys won't go out? Or when we go out, they tag us out. They won't join us or they try to get rid of us. And so we were like, fuck it, we'll play together. I remember both just being like, cool, if they won't play with us, we're going to play so hard that eventually when they want to play with us, they won't even be able to catch up. But I've seen it change. You know, there's always going to be that bias. Are women funny? Which is ridiculous. I have a lot of theories too about why there's such a narrative about are women funny?
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is that thing of we want girls to be pretty and dateable and all that stuff. And to make someone laugh is to have power over them. And that can kind of get unfamiliar and uncomfortable to certain types of guys. Also, I think it's a thing of keeping us in our place that's like an old remnant. It's just for decades in comedy, it just always was a man's club. You can count on one hand. Well, there was the Carol Burnett show and there was
I Love Lucy.
Yeah, but you can count them on one hand. It takes a while to turn the tide.
Talk to me about what you said, and you made me raise my eyebrows. You mentioned that to make one laugh is to have power over them. Comedy, having power, and then sort of what that teaches you.
I would say the person on stage, the person who has the mic, or the person who is holding the moment of focus, you're using your voice, and there's a power in using your voice. If you really think about the intrinsic nugget of what makes comedy, what makes someone laugh, it's usually that you kind of surprise them. Your body, it's spontaneous. You think the joke was going here and it went there and you laugh. And in that moment, that spontaneous physical reaction, that person has kind of overpowered you by making you laugh. You're having this spontaneous thing that that person has done. Sometimes that's why certain types of fellas don't want to laugh at a woman. You know, women need to be like this and whatever. And I think improv, in its most exciting essence, it's an outlet. It's a way to use your voice. It's a way to find community. It's a way to have fun. It's all of those things. The best thing about being alive is connection. When you feel connected to another person, and then you get to have those moments in improv where things click into place, where a callback lands perfectly, where you're making connections, you're wrapping things up. Also, you're connecting with other human beings, and your ensemble is connecting with the audience. Improv is just all about connection. And so I think if that's, to me, the best part about being alive, improv is the thing that makes me feel the most alive. I'd say my 2 other things that I think are even deeper. I don't know about where you are. The tradition I came up with in improv is that every time we would be about to walk out and do a show, we would get each other's bags. We would touch each other on the back, look each other in the eye and say, I've got your back, I've got your back. And I was like, whoa, when I first came to improv, I was so scared of it. There was something so compelling to me about a group of people telling me they had my back. I was like, whoa, I think in some ways I've sort of been waiting my whole life to hear that. That's what we all want, is somebody to be like, if you fall, I will catch you. If you do something weird, I'll do something weirder. If you go out on a limb, take a risk, you won't be out on that limb and look back and realize you're all alone. I will be out there with you. So if that branch falls, you won't go down alone. That's so great. And the other thing I think I love so much about it is that I think on a deep mental, spiritual, psychological level, improv ultimately teaches you about you. It shows you what you're made of. It asks you what you think, what you believe, and if you have the guts to express it, and if you have the intelligence and the timing and the courage and all of that stuff to do it in a way that it's going to connect with other people.
So many beautiful things. The thing I think that's really worth mentioning in there, from my perspective, among all of the gorgeous things you said, the getting your back is something so intrinsic for me about improv, this idea of supporting each other and making each other look good. And my improv group now here in Hong Kong, as well as when I improvised in the UK and other places, we've always gotten each other's back. What's interesting about what we do, I think it's not what everybody does, but I don't know. We make eye contact when we do it. So I reach around and get someone's back, but I look them in the eye and I tell them that I get their back, and I mean it. And I mean it individually with each person. I learned from some other improvisers that they had been improvising with other people or groups where it had become this casual tap on the back ritual rather than a moment, a singular moment of clarity and giving support and consent for what we were going into. When people really improvise and love it, they love it truly and in a deep way in their soul. So it makes me single tier this concept that we would have something that could be such a beautiful interaction between two people, and to your point about connection, be dumbed down to a tap and a ritual and let's go through the motions before we jump on stage to get the lulls. I like it every time because it is a reminder, a rising back up of what it is that we've all agreed to. We're saying it every show because we mean it every time.
And then you got to play that way. Like,
follow through.
Follow through. So that moment is real, but then you have to remind yourself through the whole show when you get those nerves on the side, or you're like, I don't even remember what the suggestion was, or I'm not getting any laughs tonight, or that spiral, start to lack confidence, or you're feeling like you're not getting the references, or you're slow or foggy tonight and everyone else is sharp and fast, and all of those things. You have to get quicker and quicker about recognizing, oh, I've gone in and I've started to play for me. And I promised all these people I would have their backs. So the best way to get out of your own way is to be like, oh, I'm going to start getting some backs out there, to start recognizing risk. If you start being like, I'm going to recognize when one of my teammates takes a risk, I'm going to make the personal commitment that I will never let anyone go out on a limb without me. Like, I'm out here with you, man. If you fall, I will catch you. That's usually the best way to get out of your own way when you are kind of having that confidence spiral. And or go out there and do something, scare yourself somehow, take a big risk, because in so doing, you are helping create an environment where your teammates will recognize, oh, risky play has entered this room. It helps give permission to them to also start taking risks. That comes back to the idea of failure, which I think is really hard for so many players. We don't want to go out there and look bad. We don't want to go out there and have something fall flat or not land or just bomb. Nobody gets to win all the ball games. You don't hit the ball every time you come up to the plate, but God damn it. I always tell my students, if you're going to strike out, I want you to strike out swinging rather than watching the ball come across the plate. You strike out by not swinging too. Chris Gethard, who's a New York improviser, he's great. He always says, fear is the bloodhound that is sniffing out all of the cool shit that you must be doing. Follow your fear. If you're like, this scares me, be like, oh, that means that's what I should do, but I don't know how it's going to go. Well, that's improv.
We're also talking about this from a very self view, to be looking out from within. And part of this idea, this give and take of being part of an ensemble or a two-prov or anything, which is different than doing standalone work, in that supporting, in that getting each other's back, in that risk-taking, coming outside of your head. So maybe part of the judgment that you referenced earlier about the self is also the flip side of it, whereby sometimes you're watching and you're going, Derek, why did you do that? You know, Samantha, why are you making this choice? Are you kidding me? Coming outside of that moment of the judgment, because they, to your point, are choosing to make a risk, whether or not for them it felt risky, whether or not for you it felt risky, but they are. And
Right.
inherently within them making a choice, it is a risk. Therefore, we need to support it. So to double down on it, or the comedy rule of three, and so one person does it, let's make it a thing now. Let's make it a 2. Let's make it a 3. Instead of being inside one's own head, being outside of it as much as you can to see what they're doing and to see how we can come in and join and support. And
Right. I always think about it like, you know, those cat toys, it's a feather that's hanging on a string or whatever. And when a cat sees that, that's the only thing that exists. They're like, I have to play with that thing. I think of improvisers that way. Whatever the thing is, that we all just turn into cats. And we're like,
yes,
play with that thing.
yes, I love it.
Anything you do with judgment is going to feel like shit. And anything you do with commitment is ultimately going to work. And that gets back into the risk and the failure and all of that. Of course, we've all been in a moment where we're like, what is he doing? Or, oh no, she's missing the thing. She thinks it's this. And we all were trying to make it be that. We've all been there. Our job as players is to get to the realization quicker of, oh, I'm being a judgy asshole right now. Most of the time, I think we're judging ourselves. We're being hard on ourselves. How have my scenes so far gone tonight? What's my thing? Are the audience isn't into me tonight? Or, you know, we've all had nights where it's like, I can do no wrong out here. And then there are other nights where you have the feeling like, oh man, they're just not into me. All of that fear, failure, judgment, blah, blah, blah. I think all of it can really be distilled in that moment into commitment. Like you said, double down. It's like what Yoda said to Luke in Star Wars is you fail because you don't believe. In that moment, oh, it's not my job to be the critic of what he's doing or she's doing in this moment. Ooh, I just became the critic. My job is to commit because I told them I'd have their back. Think about what we're doing out there. We're playing the way we played as kids, where we played cops and robbers and the cops were chasing you. You were genuinely scared because you pictured it and you believed it and it was real. And that's all we're doing on stage is we are so committed. We believe it so deeply that the audience starts to see it. We're dreaming so vividly that now they can see it. It's like magic. It's totally magic. I love it. I know we're all such weirdos in improv.
Yeah.
And oh, I love us and I love the work and I love the magic so much.
Yeah. Our weird tribe. Holly, if you had words of wisdom, if someone watches this who's never tried improv before, if it was the younger version of you or your improv peers, what do you want them to know? What are your words of wisdom?
I believe that the secret of improv, I'm going to tell you the secret of improv.
Listening. Yeah.
Is listening. And we were always taught that it starts with yes and. Being in agreement is the bedrock. It's the foundation. And then we build on top of that bedrock with and what we're adding, you know, and what we're imagining and dreaming and risking and all of that. But it hit me really early on that you cannot say yes to something that you did not hear. Sometimes our inner monologue is so loud, or our inner judgment, or our nerves or whatever, that we're not listening, and you cannot say yes to something that you did not hear. So I think listening is so much more fundamental even than yes and. In general, we are very bad listeners. We are in a reply culture. We oftentimes mistake listening for just simply waiting our turn to talk. Active, conscious listening is a willingness to be changed, to be open-handed with the scene and be like, oh, this scene is going in a totally different direction than I ever conceived of, but I'm in a state of listening and therefore discovery. I think there's a deeper seed, even deeper than listening, is trust. Going back to what we said earlier, improv is ultimately going to teach you about you, ultimately where it is attempting to take you, if you will go along for the improv ride. It's deeply asking you if you trust you, if you trust your feelings, your opinions, your intellect, your emotions, your courage, your silliness, your inner weirdo, all of those things. Do you trust that if you bring that to bear, that you can handle it and that it will be received? Because I guarantee you, when you do that, when you play with vulnerability, not weakness, vulnerability meaning our most accurate measurement of courage, because it's so risky, when you play like that, what you will find if you trust yourself and if you trust your partner and if you trust the craft, what the audience will eventually affirm is that you are not alone. And that ultimately, when you bring your humanity and you trust yourself enough to expose who you are through the voice and point of view of your characters you play and the relational dynamics that you discover with your scene partners, the audience will tell you over and over with their laughter and applause, thank you for letting us know that we are not alone, that we're all weirdos, that we're all afraid of being alone, that we're all afraid that it's just me and nobody else is like this. And the reason they're sitting in those seats to watch us is because we're ultimately telling them, you ain't alone. Me too. I'm all of these things. The reason listening is the secret to improv is because you need to be listening to your scene partner and you need to be listening to the piece and you need to be listening to the scene, but you also need to be listening to your little inner weirdo that knows how to play. The more you can start to hear her or him or them emphasize what they are saying with what your scene partner is doing and just go line by line and then scene by scene and then build these magical pieces, therein lies that beautiful connection that makes life worth living, because you're connecting with each other, but you also now are in a state of connected in self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-expression, the gift that improv gives us, I think, as individuals and as artists.
Holy cow, Holly, that got super deep. If people want to find you, watch you, throw cash at you, if they want you to develop things for their TV pilot, write a funny essay, how can people get a hold of you? Where are you?
My website is just my name. I have a comedy podcast that is a fully improvised satire. We play characters who work at a fictitious megachurch, fully improvised, and it's so funny. It's called Mega. So you can follow Mega the podcast. On Instagram, I'm Holly Laurent, and on Twitter, I'm Laurent Holly.
I will put the informazione beneath. Holly, thank you so very much for your time and your energy and your views. It was lovely to speak with you and hear from you.
Same. Thanks for loving improv. And it was just a true joy to talk to you.
All right, everyone. I'm Lauren. This is Improving the World. More where this came from. Bye, y'all. Okay. Did we blow your mind? I mean, probably. If you have lovely things to say, please share them down below. And look out for more Improving the World.